Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to give this another 3 minutes to let people in, and then we'll start the meeting. Okay, I think we should kick off, Steve. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Draft New Local Plan Regulation 19 webinar for Ealing and Hanwell. My name is Ezra Abdurrahman. I sit in the strategic planning team. I'm a senior engagement officer, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues in strategic planning, Steve and Ian, and also my colleagues in the Regeneration and Economic and Growth team, Kaz and Catherine. So for today's webinar, we're going to be covering the local plan structure, and then we're going to go into detail for the proposals for Ealing and Hanwell, and then Steve will close off by talking about the different ways that you can send in your representation on the plan, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So this is a webinar. Mics and cameras are switched off. However, after the presentation, if you would like to come in and voice your question, please do raise your hand. But please feel free to pop your questions in the chat in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we'll aim to answer those either throughout or after the presentation. Thank you for joining us. This is recorded, and we will be uploading the recording and the slides onto the new local plan page after this webinar. So, Steve, hand over to you. Oh, you're on mute, Steve.
Apologies, I didn't want you to hear my coughing fit earlier. Sorry, I'll start that again. I'm Steve Barton. I'm strategic planning manager, and I'm responsible for leading the team preparing and producing the local plan. I'll start then by talking a little about what the local plan is, just to remind everybody. It's obviously a very significant, very key document that helps shape future growth and development across the borough, setting out a vision, strategic priorities, and a planning policy framework for development in line with the council's plan and priorities. And what the local plan does, in essence, is create confidence and certainty for local communities, businesses and investors about the sorts of places where development should be encouraged and the sorts of types of development that will be, in principle, supported. The local plan must be prepared in line with the requirements of national and regional planning policy, and our local plan also sits alongside the London plan, which was of course adopted in March 2021. The local plan covers a period up until 2039, so a 15-year period, and of course the local plan must be reviewed every 5 years. Now obviously when you look at highlights in the local plan, it's obviously a very subjective measure, but some of my sort of personal things which I think are quite important, primarily the focus on place shaping, and I think the whole philosophy and approach of the local plan based around the 7 towns seeks to ensure that we set out very clearly our priorities for different geographies across the borough, so that each development site is contributing towards placemaking ambitions for the wider geography. And that's reflected then in the approach, in the town's approach, which is about spreading growth and prosperity and the benefits of those and investment across the borough, so that no town is left behind and no town does a disproportionate share of the heavy lifting. The plan also promotes active travel and the concept of the 20-minute neighbourhood, has key policies around supporting genuinely affordable housing, including raising the fast track threshold for viability assessments in the London plan from 35% to 40%, and seeking to make contributions for small sites. So any site at the moment which delivers less than 10 units makes no contribution towards affordable housing. We're seeking to plug that gap. There are also a suite of policies around protecting employment land and sustaining and creating jobs, including a new policy for affordable workspace. We take a very robust approach in terms of tall buildings, where tall buildings might be suitable, and set out broad threshold ranges. We also have an entirely new suite of climate change action policies, including on whole life carbon, and there's a real focus on design in the site allocations section of the town plan, where we also set out various principles and infrastructure requirements for each site allocation. And although not part of the local plan itself, sitting alongside it and part of a separate consultation but being conducted at exactly the same time, we're planning to introduce a new community infrastructure levy, effectively a tariff or tax on future development, and that will help us secure funding for the infrastructure required to support growth. We're in fact the last local planning authority in London to not implement a SIL, so it's a gap which I'm very keen to plug. Now, in terms of the structure and format of the local plan, the most important thing to emphasise from the outset is that the London plan is an integral part of our development plan, and there's absolutely no need to duplicate or replicate policies in the London plan. And indeed, our local plan must be in general conformity with the London plan. That's an absolute imperative. So we don't repeat policies in Chapter 5. We seek to either introduce new policies or variations to the London plan where appropriate. The first 2 chapters then in the local plan set the scene and the context, including showing how the plan has evolved since Reg 18, where we set out our initial proposals, based on the very considerable feedback that we received, more than 14,000 representations, and of course the additional evidence base that has been completed over the previous 12 months. Chapter 3 is when the plan really gets interesting, because we start to introduce planning policies, and Chapter 3 is the spatial strategy, which sets out the overall spatial vision for the borough and sets out strategic objectives and a high-level key diagram. Chapter 4 is very much the sort of meat of the plan, if you like, and is our collection of the 7 town plans for each of the neighbourhoods that make up the borough. And these town plans contain an analysis of those issues and opportunities that face each town and set out a spatial vision and strategy for each of the towns. And they also have appended to each of them a set of development sites, which I'll say a bit more about in a moment. Chapter 5 is quite a slim chapter. It's the development management policies. As I say, many of the development management policies are already in the London plan. So where we have decided to provide additional clarity or are required to by the London plan, we set out a policy. Where we've decided on the basis of evidence to set out new policy, for example, on climate action, this is where you'll find those mostly very technical based policies. And then finally, sitting alongside the local plan is a policies map, and all that does is illustrate on a map base all the essential planning policy designations. Now, I would urge you to have a look on our website. You'll find a very useful wayfinding guide, so that if you're having trouble looking for particular issues on particular themes, you'll be able to navigate between the London plan and the relevant policies in our local plan to be able to find the policies that might interest you. And similarly, we've also produced an Atlas of Change, which sets out in detail each of the individual planning policy designation changes that are now proposed. And we also have produced an interactive policies map, again linked off the landing page for the local plan, which does pretty much the same thing, but is much more user-friendly and interactive, so you can put in address and see planning policy designations in your area. You can also see the geography of development sites, for example. And if you click on the development site, it will take you to the relevant town plan. So I said that our local plan must operate within a broad planning framework of the National Planning Policy Framework, which is set by government, plus associated guidance, the London Plan, which of course is written by the Mayor of London, and beneath our local plan are neighbourhood plans. And we have 2 adopted neighbourhood plans at the moment for Central Ealing and West Ealing. Now, I should just point out at this stage that Ealing's local plan does not cover the entire geography of the London Borough of Ealing. And this is because there is a mayoral development corporation which covers North Acton and Old Oak, called the Old Oak and Park Rural Development Corporation, and it has separate plan making powers and has adopted its own separate local plan. So our local plan covers the whole borough except for the northeast area of the borough. Now, this slide seeks to illustrate the stages in the preparation of the local plan. So we're currently at stage 5, Reg 19, or as I prefer to call it, our final proposals. And before we got here, our journey included the early Shaping Ealing consultation, where we were seeking feedback about what you liked about your local neighbourhoods, what things needed to be improved, for example. And that was conducted alongside a very extensive process of technical evidence gathering, all of which is also on our website. So if you click on the landing page, click on the link to evidence base, you'll find links then to all of the key reports from that page. And that then informed our first round of consultation, technical terms Reg 18, as I prefer to call it, initial proposals, which we conducted between the end of November 2022 and February 2023, lasting for 10 weeks. There was also a mini Reg 18 consultation in the summer on one particular issue. And obviously since then, we've been taking stock of the many representations that we received, as I say, more than 14,000. We've obviously received and completed some further technical evidence-based reports, and we've now arrived at our final proposals, which were approved at a meeting of Ealing's Full Council on February the 21st. So subject to the end of this phase, so you've still got until 6 p.m. on the 10th of April to make representations, and I'll say more about feedback in a moment. Once this phase is completed, we will obviously then give careful consideration to any representations that we receive. We'll compile a report, and that, together with the evidence base and the plan, will then be submitted for independent examination to the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State will then appoint a planning inspector, and there will be a process which will probably last anything from 6 to 12 months, under which the examiner will forensically go through the plan and the evidence that supports it. And there will be opportunities for objectors to make representations, and at the discretion of the inspector to be heard at public hearings. Assuming the inspector finds the report to be legally compliant and sound, then it's open to full council to formally adopt the local plan. Now, I anticipate currently that we will submit in the summer of this year. I'm aiming for the end of June, and that adoption will probably take place around the summer of next year, although I need to stress the timetable for the examination, the issues and matters to be discussed in the examination, these are all determined not by me, not by the council, but by the inspector. In setting the priorities in the plan, these come directly from the council plan that was agreed in 2022. And the council plan set 3 strategic objectives around climate action, fighting inequality, and creating good jobs and growth. And within each of those three strategic objectives, there were three priorities in each of these. And those strategic objectives form the golden thread that works its way through the local plan. And you'll see that repeated, particularly in chapters 3 and chapter 4, in terms of the tapestry of policies. The vision is set out in chapter 3. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but essentially the philosophy is that we want to see more balanced growth across the borough, so that towns are not left behind, or that other towns are not doing a disproportionate share of the heavy lifting. And this is represented in a sort of diagrammatic map. Possibly the key thing to say here, because obviously what you will recognise is most of these are our town centres, with Ealing as the commercial heart of the borough being the most prominent, is the addition of two new neighbourhood centres that we propose to create, at Perivale Station and at the current White Hart roundabout in Northolt. So we now come to chapter 4. So chapter 4 are the town plans, and the approach that we take in each of the town plans is that each has its own unique challenges, opportunities, identities, characters, but we want to make sure that they all are able to contribute and share in future growth and prosperity, so that growth can be more balanced. And each town plan is structured around 4 broad sections: a sort of context section, which outlines some of the key issues, opportunities, which we've identified either through the technical evidence base or from the evidence that we've gleaned from you, particularly in the Shaping Ealing survey, which we conducted right at the beginning. We then set out a town spatial strategy, which seeks to articulate how the borough-wide spatial strategy and vision will be translated into a neighbourhood policy that will help guide future development investment in each of the geographies of Ealing. And then sitting beneath that are a series of more town-specific policies, which set out detailed policy for different areas within each town. And then finally, as I said before, a set of development sites. Those are those locations which we think will be critical to delivery of our overall spatial strategy and meet identified needs for things like new homes, jobs and employment space, and any necessary infrastructure, for example. And there are 84 that have made it through to this stage. We consulted, if you remember, on 118. So turning now to the Ealing chapter first, I'll then come to Hanwell. So Ealing today is home to 91,000 people, equivalent to a quarter of the borough's overall population, and covers several very distinctive neighbourhoods. The commercial heart, as I've already indicated, of the borough, with the metropolitan town centre having shops, offices, civic functions that attract people from across the borough and beyond. Ealing Town has the highest concentration of knowledge-intensive employment in the borough, with nearly 4,500 jobs in financial and professional services, reflecting the importance of the Oxbridge Road corridor in accommodating the borough's higher quality office stock. But Ealing is also the most expensive town in the borough to do business, as rents are significantly higher than the borough average. Ealing is the second most unaffordable town in the borough, actually after Acton, even though it has some of the highest average resident incomes in the borough. And current land and house prices in this area mean new homes may not be affordable for existing and new residents. And this has seen conversions of spacious villas, for example, into houses of multiple occupation, which has had a wider impact, sometimes undermining heritage and townscape elements. And much of Ealing Town is covered by conservation areas, 14 in total, with another one proposed and consulted upon straddling the Christmas period, where we're carefully assessing the responses before deciding what to do next. In terms of challenges and opportunities, Ealing faces a prospect of declining employment opportunities. Despite its prominent economic role for the borough, the number of businesses in Ealing has actually only grown by 2% since 2015, so one of the lowest growth rates in the borough. Alongside this small growth in the number of businesses, the actual number of jobs in Ealing has actually fallen by 3% over the same period. Another challenge is clearly, as I've already identified, the lack of affordable homes. Despite parts of Ealing Town having excellent connectivity in particular areas around the Broadway and West Ealing, many of the smaller neighbourhoods throughout the town's hinterland do have relatively poorer connectivity, with residents not able to access neighbourhood centres or in particular move easily in a north-south direction. In addition, many areas also suffer from poor air quality, with air quality focus areas identified at Hanger Lane due to its proximity, of course, to the A40, the North Circular, and along the Uxbridge Road. Opportunities for the town. Well, the town could provide the spatial focus for exploring how affordable workspace provision can address the increasing cost of enterprise and address the town's recent loss of higher value employment. The reimagining of local centres as a network of 20-minute neighbourhoods is another key opportunity. An investment within those neighbourhoods would provide the opportunity for new community infrastructure that would encourage these areas to act as social hubs. And Ealing Town also has a strong historic and existing cluster of West London's cultural and creative businesses, with specialisms in things like music venues, recording studios and dance studios. Together with the long established institutions in Ealing Town, these businesses provide the opportunity to focus and attract new investment into Ealing Town to diversify the current offer, building the nighttime economy and celebrating existing local culture. So with that backcloth, the spatial vision proposed is that Ealing will continue to play a central role in the borough, providing a wide range of commercial, retail, cultural and civic amenities, as well as hosting a large portion of the borough's knowledge-intensive jobs. Now, while many of the residents do benefit from relatively high wages and good health, there are pockets of deprivation that remain, and housing affordability is a key issue. So the historic pattern and character development, which is largely pedestrian friendly and highly sustainable, will be reinforced and expanded with active ground floors and the protection and enhancement of mixed uses, physical and social infrastructure and green spaces. Growth in Ealing therefore presents an opportunity to deliver more affordable housing coupled with higher value jobs, and this will see employment-led development that will strengthen Ealing Broadway's economic identity as a hub for well-paid, knowledge-intensive jobs, whilst also safeguarding and providing new affordable workspace. The existing hierarchy of town centres with Ealing Metropolitan Town Centre will be maintained and complemented by a strengthened network of local centres in northern Ealing, including Pitshanger Lane, and southern Ealing, which includes Northfields and South Ealing, with improved active travel measures. In terms of the spatial strategy, Ealing will capitalise then on its excellent transport connections to drive sustainable development as an important centre within West London, using growth to enhance the character of different areas and centres. We will seek to maintain and enhance the historic morphology of Ealing, which is highly mixed and walkable, forming a cluster of some of the borough's most exemplary 20-minute neighbourhoods. The Brent River Valley provides a green lung and flood protection corridor for Ealing, and this will be preserved and enhanced as part of a broader regional park strategy, and more green links will be introduced with urban greening measures. Housing affordability and access to the housing market remain key drivers of inequality in Ealing. This will be addressed by targeted delivery of housing according to local needs and the character of different neighbourhoods. Promoting and expanding Ealing's hub role within the borough and the West London area for knowledge-intensive jobs, including the potential for affordable incubator units within the Metropolitan Town Centre. And then improving north-south active travel connections are a priority, with better public realm and cycling infrastructure, particularly in around Pitshanger Lane, South Ealing and Northfields. And then finally, the plan sets out key infrastructure delivery priorities for the town. And that's illustrated in a spatial strategy key diagram. And then the town plan then sets out a series of spatial policies, the most significant, of course, being the Metropolitan Town Centre itself, which, as I said before, be the location for significant higher density residential employment growth. North Ealing, building on its strong character and mixed uses, and the strong local character and facilities of South Ealing and Eden Common being maintained and strengthened. There are 25 development sites now proposed at Reg 19, so 12 that were consulted upon at Reg 18 have not made it through to the final cut. Of those 25, 15 development sites potentially would be suitable for a tall building, of which 11 sites have been identified for tall buildings of 10 stories or more. And this map illustrates the development sites in Ealing Town, and no surprise that most of those are in or in very close proximity to the Ealing Metropolitan Town Centre. So now turning to Hanwell. So Hanwell today is home to approximately 30,000 residents. It's actually one of Ealing's oldest neighbourhoods, having grown from a medieval village into today's modern town that borders Ealing Metropolitan Town Centre and contains many valuable local heritage assets. However, 17% of Hanwell's local super output areas are in the top 20% deprived nationally, the third highest actually in the borough. Hanwell is of course well connected by rail with Hanwell, Castle Park and Drayton Green train stations. However, these primary transport hubs are situated in the northern part of the town, leaving the south of Hanwell more dependent on local bus links. And Uxbridge Road therefore provides a very important radial vehicular connection, but it also helps to sever Hanwell into two broad areas. Hanwell also benefits from numerous quality green and open spaces. However, these valuable local assets are sometimes not always easily accessible by active travel, and north-south pedestrian and cycle links could be improved. Turning then to the challenges and opportunities, Hanwell is one of the least affordable towns in Ealing, with local wages not keeping pace with growing house prices. This is placing increasing pressure on local residents struggling to meet increasing rents, particularly brought on by the opening of the Elizabeth line. Hanwell's economy largely does depend on the public sector, so this reliance coincides with the decline in employment and particularly a loss of higher value jobs and business support and manufacturing in recent years. Public transport provision is very good in parts of Hanwell, but the area lacks a cohesive network of walking and cycling routes. High levels of severance caused by the Uxbridge Road limits opportunities for active travel between valuable amenities, green spaces and employment sites that are situated either side of Uxbridge Road. In terms of opportunities, the Elizabeth line, though, has become a catalyst for attracting inward investment, and creating more inclusive growth means ensuring that future opportunities for development are sensitively planned to support Hanwell's wealth of existing heritage assets, while supporting sustainability and attracting new business and affordable housing to the area. Hanwell Town Centre, the Lower Boston Road and Boston Road itself provide a diverse range of key services, retail and local jobs to local communities. An increased support of independent businesses and community-led activity in these areas would increase employment and footfall, would also help to further distinguish the town from neighbouring West Ealing. Distinct opportunities exist to better connect Hanwell's primary transport hubs with its abundance of local landmarks, valuable green spaces and visitor attractions through the incorporation of improved pedestrian and cycle routes. So turning to the spatial vision for Hanwell, Hanwell then is a compact area, rich history, strong local character, prominent local heritage assets and green spaces. And growth in Hanwell will focus on diversifying the town centre's retail and commercial offer, whilst maximising the opportunities provided by the Elizabeth line to deliver new homes and jobs for residents. Hanwell Town Centre, so District Centre, will remain the primary location for retail, cultural and community services, and the local high street will be reinvigorated by significant mixed-use development, including residential development at key sites along the Uxbridge Road, closely linked hubs at Hanwell Station and Ealing Hospital. And in terms of spatial strategy, development will be delivered through careful contextual design. This means building in a way that reflects, complements and suits local surroundings. It's therefore informed by existing character areas and promotes heritage assets. Connectivity will be improved and severance caused by the Uxbridge Road and the railway will be reduced across Hanwell. Hanwell's economy will be strengthened and diversified, including expanding the offer, the critical mass of services and employment in the district centre, delivering master plan-led intensification of the Trumpus Way, locally significant industrial site, ensuring adequate provision of affordable workspace, integrated development of the area around Ealing Hospital to deliver mixed and commercial uses and a master planned intensification of the LSIS there, delivering on Hanwell's affordable housing needs, particularly for first-time buyers, as well as those with identified specialist housing needs, and supporting social infrastructure, exploiting opportunities created by the Elizabeth line to boost diversity in Hanwell's local economy, and capitalising on opportunities for heritage-led regeneration, particularly along the Grand Union Canal and around Warncliffe Viaduct. And finally, the plan sets out the key infrastructure delivery priorities for the town. And again, that's illustrated in a key diagram. There's just the one spatial policy in the Hanwell chapter, and that's, as I indicated before, to maintain and enhance Hanwell District Centre as its role as the key provider of local services, amenities and employment. There are 8 development sites in the final version of the plan, 5 less than we consulted on at Reg 18. 4 of these sites are considered to be potentially suitable for a tall building, of which 2 sites have been identified as being suitable for 10 stories or more. And again, this map illustrates where those development sites are, with the majority being located in close proximity to the district centre. So before concluding, I wanted to say a little bit about development management and also community infrastructure levy. So chapter 5 is where the development management policies are contained. There are 18, so a few more than we have in the current adopted plan, and that's primarily because of our new suite of climate action policies, which are entirely new. Now, the development management policies, as I said right at the beginning, will take one of 2 forms. They'll either be local variations to existing London Plan policies. London Plan already provides a quite comprehensive suite of development management policies, or there'll be entirely new local policies. And these are the policies, as I say, that are used to help determine individual planning applications. And I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but they include policies on design, a robust approach to tall buildings, on supporting and delivering more affordable housing, on protecting employment land and supporting more affordable workspace, urban greening, biodiversity, supporting more sports and recreation facilities in line with the Council's overarching strategy, and the climate change suite. On community infrastructure, as I said before, this is effectively a tax on future development, a tariff if you like. We're consulting on this alongside the local plan, but it is a separate consultation, but it's exactly for the same calendar period. And as I said before, the primary use of SIL is to gain financial contributions from certain types of development to help fund new or improved strategic infrastructure required to support growth identified in the local plan. It's a non-negotiable charge on development, so it creates certainty that new development will contribute to the essential infrastructure needed to support growth, and it's much more consistent way of gathering planning obligation money than the current 106 agreements mechanism. Now, Section 106 will continue to sit alongside community infrastructure levy when it's implemented, and particularly for site-specific mitigation, but also for non-infrastructure requirements, things like affordable housing and employment and skills training. And the rates are set out here. I'm not going to go through this in detail. As you'd expect, higher rates are set for residential development. And we also set a higher rate for residential development in central Ealing, covering much of the centre of the town. And that's based on the evidence that we have around viability and the values. Now, if you want to have your say on the community infrastructure levy, as I say, the consultation will close on the 10th of April, and there's more information on our website, including the representation form, which you can send back to us. Oh, hang on, it's just gone wrong on my computer. And the mechanisms that you can use are exactly the same, in fact, as I'm about to show you for the local plan itself, except to say that for the local plan, we've also created a very helpful toolkit to help you understand and respond to the plan. That's again available from our website. Our preferred method for feedback is for you to send the representation form back via SurveyMonkey. Failing that, you can download the original representation form, complete it and send it back to us either by email or by snail mail. You can send us an email or you can send us a letter. You'll also find hard copies, should you wish, of the local plan in all of the libraries across the borough, plus the Customer Services Centre at Percival House. So last slide, you'll be pleased to know. Next steps, as I said, after careful consideration of any representations we received up until the closing date, we will then be aiming to submit the plan plus the evidence base and any representations that are made to the Secretary of State for independent examination. Now, I must emphasise, we can't actually make changes to the plan now. We've gone beyond that point. This is what the Council considers to be the final version of the plan. We can suggest modifications to the plan, however. For example, if a change would result in better clarity about the policy or explanation about the veracity of the policy, those are sorts of things which would be considered quite minor. But these would then be contained within a schedule, and it will be for the inspector and the inspector only to decide, based on the representations that are made, whether or not he or she considers those acceptable or not. If more significant amendments were considered appropriate or necessary, either by the Council and especially by the inspector, that could require further rounds of future consultation. Then the inspector's job is to basically test whether the plan meets various tests, either around legal compliance or the tests of soundness. The tests of soundness are set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, and again, very helpfully reproduced on our local plan landing page. And as I said before, we're aiming to submit in the summer of this year. I'm currently aiming for the end of June. Obviously, I'm not in charge of the examination timetable or the matters and issues that will be discussed, but my best guess is that the inspector will seek to have public hearing dates towards the end of this year, autumn, winter, or possibly early into the new year, with adoption by full council potentially possible by the summer of next year. So you'll be pleased to know that I'm now going to pause and invite any questions. I'll have a look at the chat first. Ezra?
Hi, Steve. So I'm just chipping in for Ezra. So I think most of them have been answered by Ian. There is just one question that we have got here, and that is, who determines how SIL is spent? Is that through the full council process, and is there a policy setting out how SIL levies will be spent to support community infrastructure and amenities?
Well, that's a really, really good question. So ultimately, yes, it is the council, but the council, as you may also be aware, is also consulting on a whole range of separate measures about how we can improve governance, particularly at a town-based level. And so it is envisaged, although there are no proposals on the table at the moment, that there will be an element of SIL that will be spent with input from the various town forums that are being established. Now, how that's all going to work is above my pay rate, but we are looking at quite innovative ways in which some of those key decisions can be made with the involvement and participation of local communities. And I think that reflects the work that we've done in terms of technical evidence setting, in terms of where the priorities are, but also that we want to continue to reflect, as we did in the formulation of the infrastructure delivery plan, the priorities of local communities. We have set out our broad set of priorities, as I say, in that plan and in the schedule, and you'll see in chapter 3, but for each of the town plans, tables which set out the broad priorities. They're highly generalised in many cases, and in some cases are quite specific. So I think there will be fantastic opportunities in the future for further work and further consultation around how those individual components work. So technically it's the council, but I think the council wants to move to a much more involved approach to decision making, the details of which are yet to be worked out. I mean, hand in glove with that, I should say, whilst we're obviously conducting the SIL consultation alongside the local plan, the examinations will probably diverge in part. We're aiming to actually try and speed through the SIL because it's a very technical focused consultation, so the scope for the examination is narrower. So it's quite conceivable that we could get to a position where we could potentially adopt a SIL, being fanciful, possibly by the end of the calendar year, but certainly by the beginning of the next financial year, assuming, of course, the inspector finds the draft charging schedule to be sound. And I know, as I say, Catherine may have some more information on this. There is a wealth of work being done in terms of future governance structures for the town forums. I don't know, Catherine, if there's anything else you wanted to add on that or are able to at this stage.
Thanks, Steve. I think it's a work in progress at this point in time, but like you say, there is work ongoing to set out those governance structures and exactly how they'll be operating, and consultation is continuing as well with the Your Town, Your Voice programme that is associated with that, and bearing that in mind through each of these different work streams that are progressing so that we're doing it in a joined up way across the council is really important to us at the moment.
Thanks, Catherine. So it's watch this space, basically. So there is some exciting work being done. I'm not involved in it directly, but I'm aware from the margins. So, you know, do watch this space. I think it's going to be quite groundbreaking. Where do you want me to go next, Kazim?
Great. Yeah, so we've got another few that's just popped up in the chat.
Yep.
First one is, how is affordable and genuinely affordable defined?
So these phrases are often used interchangeably. In planning policy, we don't actually refer to genuinely affordable housing. We refer to affordable housing, and the target is the same as the target that we are, the strategic objective, which is set within the London Plan, which is 50%. That's the target. Some people often get this confused with the viability threshold, which is currently 35% in the London Plan. And all that means is if you provide 35% affordable housing, in most circumstances, there are differences. If it's public land, for example, it's 50%. If you provide affordable housing at 35%, the developer is not required to provide an independent viability assessment, to provide a viability assessment, which we then independently assess, we are proposing the local plan to raise that threshold from 35% to 40%, because we're determined to squeeze every last unit of affordable housing out of developments to optimise development sites. So that's a very important policy. That's in chapter 5.
Great, thanks, Steve. Another one we've got here is, are you expecting all sites earmarked for development to be built on by private developers, or will the council or public bodies develop any of these sites?
That's a really, really good question. So, I mean, the first thing to say is the development sites wouldn't feature in the plan unless we thought there is a realistic prospect of them coming forward, being delivered over the next 15 years. So one of the reasons why some of the sites didn't make the cut is because we weren't convinced, there was evidence to support that. There was also other good reasons for taking out sites, because the feedback that we got from local communities was we didn't think this was the right sort of development in this particular location, or in fact we don't want to see development in this particular location for a particular reason. So we have listened, and there have been quite significant amendments in terms of sites that have made the cut and the red line boundaries of some of those sites. So some of those sites are entirely in the council's ownership, particularly, for example, things like housing estates, or there will of course be leaseholders who have an interest in the land in those estates. Others will be entirely privately owned, and so it's quite conceivable that in some instances there will be the council going alone. There'll be other instances where we're working with a private developer, and there'll be other instances where it'll be entirely private led. There'll be other examples where a private developer will bring on board a housing association, old money, so I'm old, residential social landlord, to provide and manage an element of the housing that they propose to provide. So it's a bit of a mixed economy. So I can't say it's going to be one or the other. It will depend. Where we have the relevant information in each of the individual site allocations, all 25, we indicate the ownership of the site as either being public or private or mixed. I noticed also a question here, probably a good lead on, about Gurnell Grove. I'm not sure whether that was actually a reference to the Gurnell Sports Leisure Centre as opposed to the housing development across the road. But Gurnell is a site allocation in the local plan, and you'll find that at 19 EA on page 208, if I've not misunderstood the question. Kazim.
Great, thank you. Another one here around planning loopholes and will they be addressed? So when they're talking about planning loopholes, they've given an example of changes to size, height, or any restrictions post initial approval.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a very broad question. I suppose it depends on what the issue is in terms of planning loopholes. I mean, the biggest planning loophole, in my view, is permission. Because you can change, for example, use from one function to another. I mean, offices is particularly topical at the moment. I can think of some very celebrated examples in Ealing, and we have no mechanisms, the local planning authority, to assess the design quality of the conversion. We get no money towards affordable housing contributions, and we get no contribution towards local infrastructure. And you'll be aware that government has increased and is proposing to increase the range of PD rights that exist. This is in addition to anything which obviously applies to individual householders. I'm talking about some of these bigger scale changes. And one which I think I should also mention is converting vacant shops into homes. And the danger there, particularly I would say in some of the smaller and local neighbourhood town centres, is that could result in pepper potting and therefore break up the cohesiveness and integrity of individual town centres, which actually undermines the objectives that we set in policy, but for which we will have, unless we adopt some quite draconian measures through introducing things like Article 4 directives, we will be powerless to prevent or to stop. Okay, so I'm not quite sure if those are the sorts of things that the questioner was alluding to, but if not, do come back at me.
Brilliant, thank you, Steve. There's another question here, it's quite broad, but it's how will thriving retail be fostered when current sites remain vacant?
Yeah, I just on the other question, one other thought occurred to me. One of the biggest loopholes, by the way, was that developments of less than 10 units make no affordable housing contributions at the moment. None. It's often a surprise to people when I explain this to them. It also means we don't often optimize development because developers, even though the site could accommodate 14 or 15 homes, choose to build 9 so they can get out of their obligations on affordable housing. We're plugging that loophole as well. So, sorry, coming back to your question, Kaz, on the retail. So clearly, obviously, we've done a number of town centre health checks, which shows a mixed performance across the various town centres. When you ally that with the survey data that we got back, particularly at Shaping Ealing, there's clearly a demand for a better, more diverse range of goods and services being provided to be provided locally. But of course, that has to be, we have to take into account viability. We can't mandate, a local supermarket in every single centre, even if we aspire to do so. So clearly, obviously, the retail trade is not something which we license or legislate. It's independent, it's private, and you will know that there are retail companies which do very well and thrive, and there are others which get into difficulties and they disappear from my high street. I mean, I used to live in West Ealing. How many of those retailers now, the Woolworths, the British Home Stores, which were cornerstones of that particular town centre, they're no longer with us. And so the question then is, do you want to see vacant shop fronts? We don't. And what alternatives can we get in? And we are quite fortunate in Ealing that we do have quite a dynamic independent sector, and particularly in terms of diversifying town centres. Retail is clearly obviously a key part of that, but we also want to see a wider range of services, in particular in terms of places to eat, places to drink, places where there are leisure activities. And I think one of the things you can say about Ealing Town Centre, it's a much more diversified offer, particularly now with the return of not just one but 2 cinemas. So that we obviously want to encourage our town centres as places where people want to come and gather, where there is a wider range of services. I should have actually also mentioned civic as well.
Great, thanks, Steve. Got one last one here, and that is, how do we make sure that proposals, development proposals, are fitting with the character of each part of Ealing? And is there a heritage officer or someone that looks at that specifically?
Well, I've got very good news on the latter part of that question. It's taken me a lot longer to get there, but we are looking to bring back a conservation officer for the borough, possibly more than one officer. I know my manager, Jen Peters, is currently preparing a restructuring, which will bring in new posts, including also for urban design, with a complement of staff doing work around infrastructure, planning obligations, and also around implementation of our climate action policy suite. So there are some specialist posts that will be advertised in due course that will be coming into the planning department to augment the vast majority of us who are generic, i.e. jack of all trades. And speaking personally and professionally, I really welcome that development. So watch this space. So I forgot the first part of the question. Sorry, Kazim.
It was just about the officer and how that supports the fitting, how a development proposal can fit in with the character of the area. So it's linked up. That's fine. Yeah. I believe that's it.
Just one other thing to say in relation to that, and that is we've done the characterization study, and we've also produced a very comprehensive, again on our website, housing design guide, and that starts from a contextual approach, and I think that's been quite groundbreaking.
Brilliant, thank you. No more questions on our side.
Are there any hands? There's a hand up there, Kaz.
There is indeed. Are we allowing microphones in this? I don't believe we are. We?
Sorry, Kaz. Kaz is producing for the first time. Yes, we are. So I think Jim's had his hand up for a while. So if you want to,
apologies.
And Jim, if you unmute yourself, if you want to ask your question directly, I'd be happy to help. Jim, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself. If you're still there. Kaz, are you able?
Doesn't look like he's here. I have unmuted him, enabled his microphone, but it doesn't look like he's there.
Okay, all right, not to worry. Any other questions?
No questions on my side.
Okay, perfect. Well, just to sum up then, well, thank you very much for your continuing interest in the local plan. This webinar, as Ezra indicated at the beginning, together with the slides, will be uploaded onto the local website, so you can listen to me all over again if you so wish, or are suffering from insomnia. And we will be running the same seminar again later, and we've got seminars planned next week on Greenford and Perivale and Acton, and we'll probably be running some further ones in due course. So thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to hearing from you in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.